But without further say, I would like to give the floor to Victor and to thank you all for being here.
Kalopoyev Mase Olusas.
Thank you very much, everyone.
I'm afraid my knowledge of the Greek language is limited to this. Thank you, Google Translate. So I'll stick to English, and I hope I can make myself understood. As Christos already told you, I come from Portugal and stand before you on behalf of the Layer Group, which is the original publisher of the book, whose Greek edition we are about to launch. So, first of all, allow me to thank our Greek partners, IOANNOU Books, for inviting me to this session, and also to congratulate them for spotting the book and betting on the author well before it became the worldwide phenomenon it is right now. And for those of you who might still not be familiar with this very special book, here's a brief overview of its performance. Torturado, as it is called in Portuguese, or Crooked Plow, as it is known in English, or Stravo Aletri, as it will be known in Greek from now on, is the debut novel of Brazilian author Itamar Vieira Jr. And it was originally published in Portugal in February 2019, after winning the Layer Prize the previous year. The Layer Prize being one of Portugal's most important literary prizes, awarded every year to an outstanding unpublished novel written in Portuguese. The book was then soon published in Brazil as well, where in 2020 it was awarded another two important Brazilian literary prizes, the Jabuti Prize and the Oceanus Prize. Since then, it has been translated into 25 languages, Greek included from now on, and it sold more than 800,000 copies worldwide, which makes it one of the most acclaimed and commercially successful Brazilian novels of recent years. Out of curiosity, let me share with you that the original title, Torturado, even for a native Portuguese speaker, is both enigmatic and unusual. It is no wonder, therefore, that all foreign publishers were faced with this additional challenge of finding an appropriate title in their own languages, which was not always an easy task, and in some cases forced the publishers to resort to alternative solutions. This was not the case in English, where Crooked Plow is the literal translation of the original title. And I must add, it's not also the case in Greek, where Stravo Aletri is the literal translation of Torturado as well. But I can point out at least 3 cases where different solutions had to be found. In German, for instance, where the title translates as My Sister's Voice, and you will understand why after reading the book. In Swedish, whose title translates as The Sharp Edge, and in Arabic, whose title translates as The Black Knife. Let me share with you some other curiosities about this book. Between the first and the final version of it, there is a gap of 20 years. The author started writing the book when he was still a teenager, inspired by Brazilian literature from the 1930s and the 1940s, that is by authors such as Jorge Amado, Graciliano Ramos, and João Cabral de Melo Neto, for instance. And because the book is about the love that Brazilian farmers feel for the land itself, the love for the earth of the Brazilian countryside, the author always thought no one in Brazil would be interested in the story. So he never submitted the manuscript to any Brazilian publisher. Instead, he decided to submit it to the Leia Prize in Portugal in the hope that it would be read and appreciated on its own merits. Well, let me remind you that we were in 2018 and that back then, one printed copy of every manuscript had to be sent to Leia by post. When the author went to the local post office to dispatch the printouts of the manuscript, postage was so high that he seriously considered giving up. Fortunately, he did not. And then when he got the call from Portugal, announcing that he was the winner of the Leia Prize 2018, his mother refused to accept it and tried to convince him that it was a trick, that there was no prize whatsoever. Well, this is a little bit of the background of this book, which, as you saw, was born rather humbly, and ended up becoming an international bestseller, critically acclaimed and highly recognized all over the world. And I'm going to end on this final note, this book is now truly recognized all over the world, as proven by the several international literary prizes it has been awarded. For besides winning the Leia Prize, the Jabuti Prize, and the Oceanus Prize, already mentioned, it was longlisted for the 2024 Dublin Literary Award, and it was awarded this year's Prix Montluc Résistance et Liberté in France. Last but not the least, Torturado or Stravo a Lettre, as we may call it from now on here in Greece, he's currently shortlisted for the prestigious International Booker Prize, the final results of which will be announced next week on May 21st. So please join me and let's all keep our fingers crossed until next Tuesday. Thank you all very much. Ευχαριστώ.
Good afternoon on my part as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. I really want to confirm what Christos has already mentioned about all those happy coincidences. I had already read that book before I was asked to translate it. And I was actually wondering whether a Greek publisher would jump on that opportunity to translate a book from an author from Brazil. So in 2019, when he wrote this book, he was 40 years old, and he attempted to rejuvenate the literary tradition of Brazil. Jorge Armando, Graciliano Wars. I believe that only one book of his has been translated into Greek, and it was not so widely acknowledged. And João Guimarães Rosa, that has never been translated into the Greek language. So it is a big challenge for publishers in Greece. But all these three classics of Brazilian literature are now gaining a new life in the Greek audience. So knife, plow, and blood are the three keywords that are actually the backbone of the parts of the narrative. It's not a linear narrative. Actually, we can follow certain periods of times of the main characters of the book, and we can see how they live their life within a community of Black Brazilian people living in a fictional place, Aqua Negra, which does not really exist, but it could potentially be a place where the Black people, after being liberated, they continued to live as if they were still in slavery. Also, in this novel, we haven't got a clear concept of time or place in a specific manner. Readers and the translator as well, can follow the narrative through the use of indices. We know that we're talking about the inner land of Bahia, and there is mention of on two rivers. Utinga is one of them, and Santo Antonio is the other one. So when one is reading the book, you can simply shape a general picture of the geography of the narrative. Also, Chapada Diamantina is mentioned, but and this was a bit challenging for me because there was no clear reference of the time and place. But I made the decision to use a certain time for my narrative in Greek, using the elements of the car that they were using, Ford Rural, that was launched in the market in the end of 50s until mid 70s. So when the character had an accident and was at about the age of 7, it means that we are probably in the 60s. So this means that the whole storyline takes place from the 60s, and then we have the appearance of electricity and TV, and then on. But at the same time, you have got some backwards narrative because you can see that according to the narrative, back to his birth at the beginning of the 20th century, 30 years after the abolition of slavery in Brazil. So these were the challenges, some of the challenges that I was faced with while I was trying to translate the book. But at the same time, this means that you, as a reader, can read a book of, so to say, social history and not a history book itself. We have some indirect mentioning to historical events. And also we have got stories where the main characters are females, and we have a story, an incident of two women while one of them has an accident and has her tongue cut while trying to taste the edge of a sharp knife. One of her loses her ability to speak forever, and the other one suffers important injuries. So it's these two sisters. It's also the twin sisters, Crispina and Crispiana. So while I was reading the book, I wondered whether there is some special mention to ancient Greek mythology with Philomela and her sister, with that description of the incident. Also, we have other female characters, the mother, the grandmother. It is a book where plenty of female characters appear. Also, it's a book that talks about the beliefs, the religious and the beliefs of the Black Brazilian people. and we have access to information about some pagan and Christian elements at the same time coexisting. Um, and I feel that this is the depiction of the reality of the black people in Brazil that were many times considered and treated as lower category Brazilians, because after their liberation they had absolutely nothing. They had no property, no income. Imagine that about 5 million black people were transported from Africa to Brazil, and when they were released in 1888, basically you have got this big number of people wandering around from plot to plot, trying to find a job and make an income. So they are a very special social group with very specific challenges and obstacles. Also, we have got this conflict between older and younger generations in this book, and you can see that this is a synthesis, a composition of a narrative that you can follow in real time through the narrative of the author. So that's all from me now. Probably now I should give the floor to my fellow participants. Christos mentioned that I am a journalist in 953 national broadcaster that focuses on cultural issues. I read the books only a few years ago, and I really want to thank the publisher because I was given the opportunity to get to know parts of international literature that I was not aware of. And the very book gave me the opportunity to get to know what living in rural Brazil means in a time and place where there is a very specific population composition that I didn't know much about. And I'm talking, of course, about the black people of Brazil. The space where the narrative is taking place is the inner lands of Brazil, and time can only be inferred through dispersed elements throughout the narrative. But how much do we know about the history of those people? On a personal level, I can admit that I knew very little about them. Yes, of course, because the truth is that the black population is not widely known about. You've got the independence of Brazil in 1822, and the number of the white people was about 1 million people, but the black people was double as many, of course. Brazil is a country where you can see that there was a mixing of the different ethnic groups. And for this reason, you can see that nowadays we have got various skin tones among the population of Brazil. But do you think that they were effectively represented? We have got Machado de Assis, who is a classic in Brazilian literature, and he is also descendant of black origin, and his grandparents were slaves as well. But in Greece, to be honest, we don't know much about Brazilian history, Brazilian literature, and the background of all those people. I wouldn't claim that I am an expert myself either. I had to study a lot in order to be able to understand what is really going on with this book. And I also had to explain things using footnotes often enough while translating. For instance, there is a scene where you use the footnote as a matter of fact, because there is a very special idiomatic expression which is used. There's a native girl talking to a black woman, and she is using an expression that goes in Greek that my grandmother was caught with the teeth of the dog. So I tried to decipher what this idiomatic expression is about. And I really needed to do some thorough research. And I finally found out the fact that this expression comes from the practice of white people that used to train their dogs to run behind the black people and bite them and catch them in this way. So it is actually an expression, an idiomatic expression that has a rich cultural background. And it is indicative of one's origin, actually. Let me say something else here, by the way, that if we didn't have access to all of this information with the help of the internet nowadays, probably we would still be wondering nowadays what this expression means. So if this book were to be translated 40 years ago, let's say, that work of the translator would be even more challenging, of course. Of course, I totally agree with you. The fact that we can have direct access to all of this information is invaluable. Again, you have to always have your critical thinking, but it is a great help to us. Okay, now going back to the translation workshop, this is very interesting because we can say that there are many similarities between translators and journalists. We can understand now from what you have said that translators many times have to do a lot of research before they continue with their translation work. But before that, let me ask you something about the idea of family and this very specific family. So in this family, you have a father who's a very spiritual person and an important figure for the local community. You also have his wife that is a midwife and has helped with labor giving of many children of the local community. Two little girls, the daughters, Bibiana and Belonisia. These are the very first two characters that appear in the narrative, and that story with this valuable knife that they discover under the bed of their grandmother. The name of the grandmother is Donana, who is a woman who, until the end of the book, maybe is one of the most powerful characters. It feels as if she has given birth to all of the family members. So can you talk to us a little bit about that female character, where she represents the relationship with the rudimental, the ancient origins, and the motherland? I think that she represents the power of nature, and she claims her position as a woman in the local community. Of course, you can feel that there is more power to men in this community, but you can see that she is trying to transfer her power to her granddaughters, who, despite the injury, they do gain this power through their grandmother. The grandmother used to be a midwife as well. That was another challenging point for me as a translator, because in the Brazilian language, the word is mãe de begazão, which basically means that it's that woman that catches the baby the moment that is coming out during labor giving. So I was trying to make up a way to explain this notion and to use something, a word that could also bring us the idea of mother in mind, because it is an important element. She was the one that has helped with so many labor givings in the community. And then she passed this gift to the mother of the family, and further on to she passed this power to her granddaughter. What about the education level? Okay, we're talking about the 60s, and we're talking about a poor family that didn't have access to the education system. The father, as you said, was a spiritual person, and is actually asking for the creation of a school for the kids of the local community. So we're talking about people that live and work on the lands, but owned by very rich, very wealthy landowners, and they do not get paid. But they are allowed, so to say, to make a living and to cultivate their own fruit and vegetables. At some point, they may attempt to sell some of their produce in a nearby village, and they have a very low income with which they will try to take care of their lands by buying seeds, for example. So these are the living conditions of this family. And we're talking about the 60s. It's not the beginning of the 20th century, it's after the 60s. So these are the living conditions of the two parents and the grandmother and the two young girls. And this book takes us until the next generation as well, which feels that they are being treated unfair against the rich and the powerful. Is that true? Well, yes, and this is the result of having had access to education, and also the fact that they decided and chose to leave that place. Their ancestors maybe didn't, but they were not forced to stay. This is important. They decided to remain there because it is what they were used to, but the youngest generation decided to leave the place. And younger generations are the ones that brought new ideas to the local communities. So on the one hand, we have called older generations that are trying to be in peace with the land's owner, but younger generations are more asking more for their rights to be recognized. And also we have got another point here that was very impressive to me, and it's the fact that the female characters of this book are very strong characters. Even that little girl that lost her capacity to speak remains a very strong girl. She never gave up. She continued working. She was a very hard-working young woman to cultivate a plot of land that was very difficult to manage, and she was really a very determined person. Yes, Belounicia is really an amazing woman who cannot speak, but she manages to find ways to communicate. For instance, she uses, in a way, the voice of her sister. She has her own way of communication with her sister, and she herself transfers what she wants to say. But when they are first separated, because her sister decided to leave the place, actually, both of them had fallen in love with a first cousin of theirs, and only one of them decided to leave the place. But then her sister also wanted to follow her footsteps. It's also that feeling of being a woman, wishing to create family. So she got married to someone, but this really never really worked. She suffered verbal abuse, but again, she stood up on her 2 feet and she tried to face him. And when her husband was killed, she never decided to go back to her parents and her family. She decided to stay where she was and to go on living on her own, working on her own, and trying to serve the community. And yes, I could definitely say that maybe this is the strongest character of all. At the same time, when her mom realizes that her sister is suffering from abuse from her husband, she says that even nowadays it's something that we don't often talk about. But one of the most powerful moments is when she says that no matter what, I will bring my daughter back. This is also a very emotional moment because we can see that there are some wild things happening and people are beginning to, the underprivileged are beginning to claim back their rights and their lives. And we've got that figure, that mother figure, and the striking way in which she is trying to deal with all of this. Yes, this is the third chapter, which is brings us back to the first one with the story of the knife. We can understand soon enough that since you've got a knife, you will have murder at some point. And I think that the main issue about these women, the main point here is the fact that none of them is seeking protection from men. Of course, there is patriarchy, of course, there is violence, but every single one of them is managing to face all of this in a very powerful and a very strong way. I think that after that, I could really understand the power of female activism in Latin America. This book really helped me understand what is happening in the countries of Latin America, and you can see that now it's obvious. Probably it's also the connection with nature that makes them so strong and powerful. Since you mentioned the connection with nature, and this is a book that talks about nature a lot and its creatures, the flora and the fauna. Was this something challenging for you as well? Well, it was a great opportunity for me to learn about flora and fauna. I didn't translate all of the animals into Greek, to be honest, because not all species have got an equivalent into the Greek language. But it was very surprising to me when I realized that we have got a cinema in Athens with the name Avora, and I thought that it was something that was made up. But no, then I realized that it is a palm tree, actually. In Greece, we haven't got equivalents of all those species, animal or plant species, and as a consequence, we haven't got the relevant vocabulary either. I tried to transliterate, in a way, the sounds of those words into the Greek language so that the Greek reader could read it themselves, and then I used footnotes providing extra information about all those species, and in this way also the reader can look it up on the internet or use the Latin name of it and see what this is all about. But again, let me tell you that it was a great opportunity for me to learn so many new things. Well, it's really nice to see that you enjoyed this work so much, and you did half of the job for us, actually, with all of those footnotes. When you first read this book, what impressed you as a reader? Well, I read it for the first time in 2022. And from the very first moment, I said to myself that this is a very nice book. And it is written in a very poetic way, so to say. And I was very lucky because we have got that repetition of sounds in the Brazilian language, which is tortoarado, but we've got the same repetition of sounds also in Greek with stravo alletri. And this is also very interesting. We've got these poetry elements in the language that is being used in this novel. And we've got the picture of two young girls playing with a knife, and one of them suffers severe injury. She cuts her tongue. She needs to be taken to the doctor. Imagine the circumstances. And the truth is that while I was reading the book myself, I was also kind of looking forward to what's going to happen next, because I could paint the picture in my mind. It's a book that can give you all the history behind without being didactical, so to say. You are just reading a novel, fiction. So shall we maybe read excerpts, some passages from this book? Probably a small passage about the plow could be chosen.
Προσπαθήσω να μιλήσω, καθώς βάδιζα μόνη μου στο ίδιο μονοπάτι που συνήθιζε να παίρνει η Ντονάνα.
The speaker is reading a passage from the book, which is a creation of the translator and the original creation of the author, so it cannot be interpreted simultaneously.
Χώματα. Μου άρεσε ο στρογγυλός, εύκολος και θορυβώδης ήχος όταν πρόφερε. Πάω να οργώσω με το αλέτρι. Πάω να οργώσω τη γη με το αλέτρι. Να είχα ένα καλό αλέτρι. Αυτό το αλέτρι είναι στραβό και παλιό. Ο ήχος που έβγαλε το στόμα μου ήταν κάτι το ακατάληπτο, ένα κουβάρι. Σαν στη θέση του χαμένου κομματιού της γλώσσας μου να υπήρχε ένα ζεστό αυγό. Ήταν ένα αλέτρι στραβό, παραμορφωμένο, που έμπαινε στη γη με τέτοιο τρόπο, ώστε την άφηνε άγονη, κατεστραμμένη, διελειμμένη.
Και ακριβώς η προηγούμενη παράγραφος.
The previous part of it also reminds us the living conditions of those people. We're talking about people that live in one of the poorest areas in the country. Again, the speaker is using a passage from the book in Greek.
Πηγαίνω συνέχεια στην πόλη για να με παρακολουθούν, για να κάνω ασκήσεις στην ομιλία, αλλά δεν ήταν δυνατόν. Δεν υπήρχε τρόπος να φύγουμε από την Άγκοα Νέγρα. Μέναμε μακριά. Δεν υπήρχε δυνατότητα να μετακινούμαστε τόσες λεύγες με τόση συχνότητα. Στο νοσοκομείο της πιο κοντινής πόλης δεν υπήρχε γιατρός που να μπορεί να κάνει την αγωγή που χρειαζόταν. Γι' αυτό δεν ξαναμίλησα.
Νομίζω, Αναστασία, αν δεν έχουμε πολύ χρόνο, πρέπει να αναφερθώ λίγο.
Anastasia, I think that one thing that we should mention is about the the traditional of this community. Jaré is an area in Chiapata Diamantina where people believe that there are the spirits, holy spirits maybe, or the spirits of past ancestors that occupy the bodies of the people of the community. And during celebrations and festivals, while you see them dressed in all these colorful clothes, carrying out their rituals, is actually an expression of the belief that they are embodying a spirit. The word which is used here is encantado or encantada, if it is for females. And this in Greek has been rendered as people that have been taken over by a spirit. Santa Rita Pescadera is one of those spirits here. And it's a woman that has been taken over by the spirits. Let's read the passage.
Καθώς μεγάλωνε και γινόταν γυναίκα. Οι Μιούντα και οι άνθρωποι εδώ δεν έλεγαν ότι ήταν μαύροι. Οι μαύροι δεν ήταν ευπρόσδεκτοι. Τους έδιωχναν από τη γη όπου ζούσαν. Έλεγε λοιπόν ότι ήταν Ινδιάνα. Όλοι τους έλεγαν ότι ήταν Ινδιάνοι. Τους Ινδιάνους δεν τους έδιωχναν. Σε κανέναν δεν άρεσαν οι Ινδιάνοι, αλλά τους ανέχονταν. Οι νόμοι τους προστάτευαν. Έτσι τουλάχιστον πίστευαν. Οι άνθρωποι στραβομουτσούνιαζαν γιατί έβλεπαν πως ήταν μαύροι. Αλλά αυτοί έλεγαν ότι τους είχαν αρπάξει τα σκυλιά με τα δόντια τους. Συνήθως ήταν οι γυναίκες που τα σκυλιά άρπαζαν με τα δόντια τους. Οπότε κανείς δεν μπορούσε να πει αν μια γυναίκα ήταν καθαρόιμη Ινδιάνα ή μισή Ινδιάνα, μισή μαύρη. Η Μιούντα έλεγε και αυτή ότι την είχαν αρπάξει τα σκυλιά με τα δόντια τους, όπως και τη μητέρα της. Αφού επέμενε, όλοι την πίστεψαν. Ίσως γι' αυτό να επέζησε στη μεγάλη της περιπλάνηση. Η Μιούντα είχε περπατήσει πολύ. Πριν εγκατασταθεί οριστικά στην Άγκουα Νέγρα, είχε περιπλανηθεί πολύ. Είχε περπατήσει τόσο πολύ, ώστε διηγούνταν τη ζωή της, όταν διηγούνταν τη ζωή της, γελούσαν, θεωρώντας ότι ήταν ψέμα ή ότι η γριά τα είχε χαμένα. Σήκωνε τον ποδόγυρο της φούστας της για να σταματήσει τη συζήτηση, τεινάζοντας τα πολλά μεσοφόρια της και σηκώνοντας σκόνη. Περπατούσε στις όχθες του ποταμού. Η Μιούντα ήταν μια γυναίκα ψάρι. Ψάρευε, κολυμπούσε, κοιμόταν το ξημέρωμα στην ακροποταμιά. Αυτή η Μιούντα, λοιπόν, είναι μια γυναίκα που στο σώμα της έχει...
So Miura is the woman that has been taken over by the spirit of Santa Rita Pescadeira. You can see that there are so many elements here. It's not a marginal part of the book to read about all of those beliefs and the coexistence of the local community with those spirits, how much they know about the local flora and the species that thrive in the natural surroundings. It's people that are right next to nature, they are deeply connected with it, and probably it's things that we have forgotten about in Western civilization. Well, the truth is that probably in the Mediterranean or in the Balkan countries, people are a little bit closer to this spirituality and to their natural surroundings as well. Probably if we can include ourselves in the so-called West world, the Mediterranean people and the Balkan people seem to have a closer connection to it. Well, yes, that's true. And maybe it's true for people of my age, more or less. But at the same time, it's something that we are kind of unfamiliar with. We're talking about paganism in Brazil. You can see descriptions of young kids playing with the corn fruits and other plants. It reminded me of myself, however, while I was reading the book. Probably I didn't do exactly the same things, but I remember myself using plants and stones and the soil to play with when I was a little girl. Yes, of course. And also the technology with the plow that was so widely used by the local farmers in Brazil was also common practice for the farmers in Greece as well. Yeah, that's true. And I also remember myself during childhood to spending nights without electricity in my small village in a faraway area of Greece. So probably this was another reason why I felt so connected with this book from the very first moment. I can imagine that this was the reason why you never really doubted about the translation of the title into Greek. No, as a matter of fact, it came out very naturally. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here, for listening to us during this conversation of ours. We really hope that we managed to talk to you about a beautiful book that has been beautifully translated into Greek and has got very beautiful illustration on the cover as well, right? Well, thank you very much, everyone. There is no microphone, so I cannot hear in the booth.
Ούτε για την ξεγεννήτρα μάνα, ούτε για όλα αυτά. Δεν είχα πορεία στο να καταλάβω. Είχα πορεία πώς να...
The question was about the midwife. The difficulty for me was not to understand what it is about, but it was a big challenge for me to be able to pass it on the Greek language and the Greek culture because there wasn't any specific equivalent.